Good evening. I would like to welcome you to a talk on the disadvantages of foreign trade. We are aware that foreign trade is the trade between various nations across the world. It is also known as international trade or global trade. This foreign trade will be consisting of three major aspects, namely import of goods, export of goods, and entry port trade, where both the transactions of imports and exports in a hybrid manner will take place. Of course, exports will promote the relations between the different nations with the bilateral trade, understanding, harmony, in addition to generating revenue to the nation from out of exports. So also, imports will enable the nationals to procure the goods from outside, but it will result in the cash outflows. In earlier occasions, we thought that foreign trade is only considered to be highly advantageous as it is getting foreign exchange reserves by promoting bilateral trade relations and earnings through exports. Equally important for us to note that this foreign trade will affect our local markets. When our people are not able to produce sufficient goods and services, we will be bound to import from elsewhere, which will weaken our products. So also, it results in the outflow of cash reserves. If we consider the foreign trade has more or less equal number of disadvantages with the advantages. Let us see one by one. The first and foremost one being the exhaustion of natural resources. Second one, excessive dependence on the other countries. Third one is very notable feature that the cost of transportation is almost doubled or trebled. There are bound to have the differences in cultural disintegration and regional affiliations. This foreign trade will also affect the employment opportunities for our nationals. It will also cause environmental pollution as it may lead to have the ecological imbalances. Moreover, excessive dumping of products imported from elsewhere will definitely have a bearing on our products and affects the local markets very badly. Sometimes, if there is no regularity in the supply channel, this may also cause the scarcity or acute shortage by depth of goods. Moreover, there are complexities in the settlement of accounts. In addition to this, the procedures and formalities are very cumbersome to comply with. Basically, the foreign trade is between two persons in two different nations, and in the connecting link channel, unnecessary involvement of more and more middlemen will cost more and burden on the consumers. Finally, this will affect the peace and understanding in the international markets in the event of any monopoly taking place in this business. Similarly, savings will also be reduced. We will consider these aspects one by one. Of course, the natural resources are the gift of the nature, but it's not only for our generation to enjoy this. It is our bounded duty to conserve the nature and keep it useful for future generations to come. In the name of export, if we keep on completely digging and mining the resources like iron ore, varieties, mica, and the like, the precious metals and alloys which are being now exported may give temporary benefit in the form of revenue. So also is the case with coal products. This will be only a short-term benefit, but ultimately, in the long term, our future generation is losing a lot of national wealth, wherein we may have to reverse the present trend. Second one is excessive dependence on other nations. It is the general policy to ensure that the country must be self-supporting and independent. The raw materials and the labor must be given full employment. Even if a small slackness or leakage in the delay of schedule meant for supplies, naturally it will affect the production chart. Finally, it will reflect on the workflow and affect the work of laborers, and machines will be underutilized or optimal capacity cannot be attained. All this will pose a hurdle to the progress, indirectly cause hardship to society and unemployment to the workforce. So excessive dependence will definitely stall our progress at one point or the other. Third one is the cost of transportation is very high. In the ordinary process, it is simple, whereas it coming from elsewhere, it is heavily penalizing the customer. The usual practice of make or buy being followed in the materials management will be helpful. Sometimes, even if it is costlier, it appears to be better to purchase from outsiders, where There is no scope for domestic production to the expected scale of operation. Next comes, in the case of imports, the cost of goods are very meager. When it comes to the shipment and other charges, cost, insurance, freight, dockyards, and other damages, along with other overheads, in addition to customs duties, anti-dumping duties, and other raw materials, the bare cost will be becoming three or fourfold, which in turn will raise the cost of production in an abnormal manner. Fourth one is the differences in the cultural habits. We know India is a country with diversity in unity. They are having so many languages, traditions, cultures, customs, and practices. Similarly, when it comes to the global markets and in dealing with those people, this will affect trade because of its barriers like disintegration in the cultural traditions, habits, which will be reflected on our trade relations, especially the wider differences which led to the diversities in language, customs, and loss of the land will cause the disintegration of the tastes of the consumers in case of likes and dislikes. Sometimes this may pose the problem which will affect the sentiments of the citizens. For example, export of meat, beef, and other products is very much affecting the sentiments of our Hindu community as they do not encourage such things to take happen in foreign trade. Next, coming to local employment, it is very badly affected. Of course, the foreign trade offers wide scope for the global employment, attracting the talented brains with rich payment and comfortable benefits along with fringe benefits. But this will pose the adverse effect and cause unemployment to the local natives of our country, especially in superior positions. Say, for example, Hyundai Motors, Kia Motors, and other positions where top level management is in the hands of foreigners. Only the field functionaries and some of the few supervisory nature posts are given to locals, which reflects poor payment. We can also show the example of Toshiba products. Next comes the environmental pollution, which is caused with this export oriented units, where in the quest for earning more and more foreign exchange, sometimes the hazardous affluents and waste from industrial units is not being properly treated with the affluent treatment plants. Finally, when wedges or submerges in the soil, will affect the health of the citizens, either in the soil or joining in the river streams, as the case may be, especially in the mining or collieries or tunnel works where underground digging or tunnel job is going on, sufficient air and ventilation is not there, the workers will get affected to the respiratory disorders leading to lung diseases or other chronic disorders. So this sort of ecological imbalances we can see in collieries, oil refineries, and other explorations of petroleum products and also in the scheduled areas. Next thing is the dumping of goods from elsewhere will give a lethal blow on the local markets as it would affect their interests very badly. Say, if we keep on going for the imports in the name of cheaper and durable rates in the form of already entered agreements or memorandum of understanding in the bilateral trade relations in different visits to other nations, indirectly it will weaken our local artisans who are very much depending on the production of certain goods. This will in turn pose disguised unemployment. Excessive dumping will also affect our goods. Of course, anti-dumping duty is also to some extent helpful as a measure to control it, but it's very minimal. During this lockdown, due to pandemic corona, especially handicrafts, mainly weavers, dyeing and printing, and other artisans, they were rendered jobless as there is no business, even in respect of temple areas or pilgrim points or tourist locations. Due to lockdown, everything came to a standstill as it became the ground level zero operational position. Moreover, foreign trade will also cause the acute scarcity of goods because the present generation may enjoy the temporal benefits, but we need to have the long term vision where if we visualize this may cause damage to the future generations due to abnormal and inarbitrate manner in which mining and export is taking place at one point of time or the other. Especially, there may be some scarcity and depth of goods in manganese, iron ore, and the like precious metals. Sometimes a reverse trend may also happen where instead of exporting, we may be compelled to have imports, then the situation is considered to be a very pitiable one. Moreover, because of the wider differences in the levels of currency being followed in various countries, and also the daily fluctuating rates of the currencies, of course, it is being given daily intimation through Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs. In addition to that, the RBI, there is bound to have the variations in the currency levels, and this will reflect in the settlement mechanism, especially with the US dollars, pounds, reals, Japanese yen, rubles, etc., with those of Indian rupees. Next, there are some cumbersome formalities. Of course, every nation have the right to follow its own customs rules and also impose other canons of taxation. But sometimes those adopted by them will be felt cumbersome by other nations in their trade practice. If there are no agreements like double taxation avoidance agreement and other advance rulings, it will be the burden for the importer, where the goods will be subjected to the taxation at multiple points, which will ultimately raise the cost of goods, which will in turn enhance the other overheads, making the goods very costlier. Next aspect is the unexpected, unwanted middleman involvement. Of course, inevitable, because the importer and exporter are located in two different locations, say different nations. The link of middlemen to carry the goods from place of origin or source to the place of destination with the different function is linked with this channel of foreign trade. But every stakeholder will charge the amount for the services he rendered, which will actually burden the other overheads, right from the stage of shipment, clearing agents, forwarding agents, customs houses, dockyard clearance. If not done in time, even demurrages will also become a heavy burden on the goods being imported. Finally, when coming to the international scenario, sometimes foreign trade may also leave some effects of the normal healthy relations, and it will affect the peace and harmony, because the foreign nationals settled here as businessmen or talented brains with expertise and the like will be automatically posing some problems and disturbing the sons of the soil. Naturally, this will create a ground for tussle, which may lead to a form of social issue. So, this needs to be sorted out amicably. Now we can recollect the recent announcement of the American president, Donald Trump, about the banning and also restriction of H-1B visas with a view to safeguard the jobs for the American nationals. But the aspiring, talented younger generation and also those who are rendered jobless and also not given extension on the on-site projects are forced to return to their native lands, and this will create a lot of disinterestedness in their career growth. Similarly, due to recent outbreak of pandemic corona COVID 2019, many skilled workers were made jobless and literally made homeless, making them to wander on the roads. Because of non-employment, the earnings what they had were consumed, and due to lockdown, continuously for 2 to 3 months, has posed a question of their life and death in the overseas. So it took very serious, and more than 8 lakh skilled workers. It's only an estimated, and figures are subject to correction in future, where such skilled workers went abroad, were rendered jobless, and complaining to our Indian high commissions and missions with a request to come back to India. Our government had taken a timely decision by operating special flights for airlifting of workers. But this will also affect the employment opportunities when it comes to our nation. Of course, it is praiseworthy to mention that in the Vande Bharat mission, it had deployed 90 such flights to international destinations up to the end of July, specially meant for airlifting of such standard passengers who were earlier the skilled workers elsewhere. So this sort of trend will affect the labor and also turnover, leading to the suspension of wages or part payment of wages. Again, which will create disgust, unemployment to the workers, and there will be a problem to the nation. Last but not least, with all these overhead charges, the cost of product will be increasing highly and leaving a meager or lesser profit margin with which the habit of saving will come down gradually, which will indirectly affect the investment mechanism, and it will have recurring consequences and effects in the national income figures to pull down from the present levels. Now, after listening to this summary, we can have the foreign trade in both the sides of advantages and disadvantages, like two sides of the coin. Okay, it is said good for the development of national economy and also for bilateral trade relations to maintain the foreign trade at low margins by encouraging more and more exports and restricting the imports to the bare minimum. This will help our nation to maintain as far as possible the safe and favorable mechanism in the balance of trade. Thank you.